The smell of lemon polish and old wood used to be the scent of my home. I remember running my hands over the dining table when it was just a raw plank of oak, dreaming of the family dinners we have here. The laughter that would soak into the grain. Now the silence at this table is so heavy it has its own smell. Something sterile and sharp, like a hospital waiting room. Why does a place built on love now feel like it is holding each breath, waiting for something terrible to happen? Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. Tonight, the dread started with the potatoes. A small sin, I know. I made them just the way my son Alex always loved, roasted with rosemary from the garden, the skins crispy and salted. His wife pushed them around her plate with her fork, the tins making a faint grating sound against the porcelain they being given for my wedding. They're a little rustic, aren't they, shop here? She said, her voice syrupy sweet, the kind of sweetness that caught something bitter. She looked at Alex, a little smile playing on her lips. It wasn't a question, it was a judgment. I saw my son nyújtóiton, but I said nothing. I just stared at his plate, his silence, although it wouldn't seem to climb anymore. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own home? When the very walls you raised seemed to turn against you. That is how it felt sitting there watching the woman how had taken my son's heart now try to take the dignity of my own kitchen. I noticed the small changes of course the way she started referring to the house as our house. Then more recently just her house when she was on the phone with her friends. My collection of antique teacups had been moved from the display cabinet to a dusty box in the attic, replaced by minimalist white mugs that felt cold and foreign in my hands. My husband, Robert, had built that cabinet with his own 2 hands right after Alex was born. Every chip in the wood told a story. Now each stories were being silenced, packed away in the dark. I tried to keep the peace for Alex's sake. I smiled, a sin, brittle sin. I always made them that way, there. It is Alex's favorite. Chloe's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, cool and calculating, had a victory I didn't understand yet. Oh, I know, she said, her voice drooping to a conspiratorial whisper. But taste change, don't they? We were thinking of redoing the kitchen, actually, something more modern. Stainless steel, clean lines. This whole country quite így vibe is a bit dated. The words high mint air, sick and suffocating. She wasn't just talking about the kitchen. She was talking about me. I was the country quite így vibe. I was dated. I looked at Alex, my heart pleading with him to say something, to defend the home I grew up in, to defend me. I finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second before skittering away. The look in them wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something worse. It was shame. I was ashamed of me, of this house, of the life that had shaped him. I remembered him as a little boy at this very table, his legs too short to reach the floor, his face smeared with chocolate from a birthday cake. They looked at me with such adoration, as if he held the whole world in my hands. Was it too soft all these years? Did I raise him wrong? Did I give him so much that he never learned the value of anything, including his own mother? The silence stretched on, pulled taut like a wire. I could feel the tremors of the coming earthquake, the deep foundational shift that was about to break everything apart. My hands, resting in my lap, felt a familiar grain of my linen napkin. A small tangible piece of a leaf that was rapidly becoming unrecognizable. In the corner of the room near the fireplace Robert built, shut a small oak box containing all our important documents, the deed to the house, our marriage certificate, Alex's birth certificate. They never had a reason to lock it. It was a box of memories, of foundations. He never imagined it would one day become a box of ammunition. He decided to speak, to feel terrible quiet with something, anything. My voice was steady, kölymödeni felt. This house has a lot of memories, Chloe. Good ones. Your children, should you have them, might enjoy hearing the stories held in these walls. Her fork fluttered onto her plate. The sound voice like a gunshot in the stillness. That is the problem, shop here, she said, her voice losing its sugary coating and turning sharp like broken glass. We're not interested in living in your memories. We need to build our own life, our own future. And frankly, this place is holding us back. She looked at Alex again, a clear and undeniable challenge in her eyes. Isn't that right, honey? Isn't it time we stopped letting the past dictate our lives? Alex put his fork down. Hal didn't look at me. Hal looked only at his wife, his expression unreadable. Hal took a deep breath and the sound seemed to cycle the remaining warmth out of the room. When Hal finally turned his head to face me, his eyes were not the eyes of the boy raised. They were the eyes of a stranger, cold and hard as stone. Hal said, "She is right, Mom. It is her house now. You need to start accepting that." His words didn't just hang in the air. They solidified, turning the warmth of the room to ice. It is her house now. The phrase was a stone's throw out at a window, but at me. It struck me with a force that was physical, knocking the breath from my limbs and leaving a hollow lick where my heart used to be. I looked at my son, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I had chased away, and saw only the rigid set of his jaw, the cold reflection of his wife's ambition in his eyes. Hal wasn't mine anymore. Hal was hers. A stranger sat in my son's chair, at the table my husband had built, in the house my own hands had helped raise from nothing but dirt and dreams. I finally found my voice, a quiet, fragile thing. Yet it cut through the silence with the weight of decades of love. Your father Andy built this house, Alex, he said, my gaze unwavering. Every nail, every floorboard. We didn't build it for us. We built it for you. We built it to be a home, a legacy, not a property to be claimed. Chloe scoffed. A short, ugly sound. Oh, please don't be so dramatic, shop here. It is just a house. That is when the last thread of hope I was clinging to finally snapped. I turned my eyes to her and for the first time. I didn't see my son's wife. I saw a safe. It was never just a house, I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. And it will never be yours. I saw Alex's hand raise, a blur in my peripheral vision, but my mind couldn't process it. It was unreal. A scene from a movie, not my life. Then came the sound. It wasn't loud, but it was the sharpest, most definitive sound I had ever heard. A crack that split the word in two. There was the word before my son struck me and the word after. The sound was followed by a ringing in my left ear, a high-pitched hum that drowned out everything else. The sting on my cheek was an afterthought, a dull throb that was nothing compared to the violent shattering inside my chest. In the deafening silence that followed the blow, I could hear Chloe's sharp, triumphant intake of breath. I could hear Alex's own ragged gasp, as if Hal himself was shocked at what his hand had done. It didn't cry. It didn't scream. The time for that was over. The boy raised voice gone, and in his place stood the stranger. I slowly raised my fingers to my cheek, the skin already hot and tender. My touch was distant, clinical, as if we were examining an injury on someone else. I met Alex's eyes. They were wide with a flicker of something. Voice it horror? Regret. It didn't matter anymore. Had damage voice doin. A line had been crossed that we could never ever unsrosh. What do you do when the person you love most in the world becomes unrecognizable? Do you fight for the memory of how they were, or do you accept the monster they will become? I stood up from the table. My movements measured and deliberate. Thatcher made no sound against a sick woolrug. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate of cold roasted potatoes. I didn't look at either of them again. As she walked towards the front hall, Chloe's voice, dripping with first concern, followed me. Are you leaving? It is dark out, shop here. Maybe you should come down first. I kept walking. I took my coat from the hook by the door. The familiar weight of it, a small comfort. My purse was on the entryway table, right beside a framed photo of Alex as a boy, smiling with a missing front tooth. I didn't look at it. It's wouldn't I? I opened the front door, the one Robert had spent a week hemming just right, and stepped out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me. Another final definitive sound. The crisp autumn air voice shook, clearing the fog from my mind and replacing it with a cold, hard clarity. I walked to my car, parked in the driveway had helped pave one hot summer 30 years ago. My hands were perfectly steady as she put the key in the ignition and started the engine. For a moment, I sat there, the low rumble of the car, a counterpoint of her ringing in my ear. I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was leaving a life behind, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. My mind was already working. The soft, grieving part of my heart boomwalled out by something new, something forced in the fire of that slap. Result. I opened the glove compartment, my fingers searching past old maps and insurance papers until they closed around it. It was heavy, made of solid brass, and cold to the touch. It was the original key to the main deadbolt. A special lock he had installed years ago after a scare in the neighborhood. A lock Alex and Chloe had never even known existed. I closed my hand around it, the sharp edges digging into my palm. They thought it was their house now. They were about to find out how they were. I had a thought driving through the empty suburban streets that I am deeply ashamed of. For a fleeting, ugly second, I wished that my szönes hand, the one that struck me would ache for the rest of his life. The thought was a vile poison, and I recoiled from it, my knackclash white on the steering wheel. A moteres love is supposed to be unconditional. But what happens when the condition is your own soul? The metallic taste of betrayal filled my mouth, bitter and cold. My cheeks still throbbed, a dull, rhythmic reminder. But the physical pain was a distant echo of the gaping wound inside me. I was grieving. It felt exactly like the suffocating weight that had cringed me when Robert passed away. But this was sharper, somehow more cruel. You expect this to take the ones you love. You do not expect them to stand before you, breathing and healthy, and murder the memory of how they were right before your eyes. The brusky voice a cold, heavy weight in my right hand. Each edge is digging into my skin. It was a tangible link to a past very voice a protector. Ide had that deadbolt installed the year Alex turned 10. There had been a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, and the thought of anyone harming my boy had been a terror that kept me awake at night. I remembered him watching the locksmith, his eyes wide with curiosity, asking a million questions. I had been protecting him then. Now I was using that same foresight to protect myself from him. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I drove past a park where I taught him to ride a bike, past a library where we spent rainy Saturday afternoons. Each landmark was a cost, A memory of a boy WHO no longer existed. Voice Iron Theo do this? Voice this a vengeful, petty act? For a moment, my resolve wavered. Is there a point where forgiveness becomes foolishness? Tell me what you think in the comments because I wrestled with that question for what felt like an eternity on that dark road. But then I saw his face again in my mindesai. The coldness, the dismissal. I heard his voice. It is her house now. And the iron returned to my spine. This wasn't just about a house. This was about a lifetime of love and sacrifice being treated like garbage Theo but discarded for something new and shiny. My path became clear. I wasn't driving aimlessly. I was driving toward the industrial part of town, where the lights of 24. Hour hardware stores and trade services cast a lonely glow. I found what I was looking for, a small, unassuming shop with a flickering neon sign that read, Emergency Locksmith. The man behind the counter was young, tired, and looked at me with a weary sort of kindness. I didn't ask questions when I explained that I lost my case and needed every lock on my property changed immediately. I paid him in cash, an exorbitant late-night fee that felt like the price of my own freedom. Following him back to my own street felt surreal. We parked a little way down the road. Andy watched him work under the faint glow of the porch light I left on hours ago. Every click and scrape of his toes was a countdown. I was dismantling their power, their entitlement, one lock cylinder at a time. The darkness was my ally. I had only these few hours before the sun came up to reclaim what was mine. While I worked on the front door, I slipped around the back using the old brass key. It slid into the deadbolt with a satisfying familiar click. Inside, the house was silent. The plates were still on the dining table, a monument to the war that had just been declared. I moved silently, my heart pounding, unlocked the kitchen door, the patio door, the garage access. I was a host in my own home, erasing them. When the locksmith was finished, I handed me a small, simple ring with two new gleaming silver case on it. They felt light compared to the old brass one. All set, Mom, I whispered, as if I understood the need for stealth. Nobody is getting in without these. I paid him the rest of his fee, and I was going as quickly as I appeared, his vanished tail lights disappearing around the corner. I stood alone in my driveway, the new case closed in my hand. The porch light cast a warm, welcoming circle, but the house behind it felt different now. It was a fortress. It was mine again. I took a deep, steadying breath, the night air cool on my still waking kick, and stepped forward to enter my home. Just as my foot touched the first step, a pair of headlights swept across the front of the house, blinding me. A car was pulling into my driveway. It changed in a low grovel in the dead of night. My blood ran cold. It wasn't Alex's car. This one was dark, official looking with a searchlight mounted on each side. It served Theo a stop just a few feet away, pinning me in each unforgiving glare. The headlights blinded me, but the fear that gripped me was cold and sharp, not hot and panicked. For a moment, the world narrowed to that blinding white light. Then I saw the emblem on the door, and the fear was replaced by a sudden, icy calm. It wasn't the Hello State Police. It was Citadel Security, the private service they paid a small fortune for every year since Robert died. This wasn't a random patrol. They were here because they had been called. The knowledge settled in my bones. A secret king they didn't know he had. A security service they didn't know he controlled. A young man in a crisp uniform he recognized got out of the driver's side. His name was Ben. A polite boy WHO had helped me with a flat tire last Christmas. His face, illuminated by the harsh glare of his own vehicle's lights, was etched with concern and confusion. Emberes, Adabio. H.E. asked, his voice hesitant as H.E. approached. Shop here. Is everything all right? I didn't let her relieve show on my face. Instead, I kept my expression carefully neutral. I am fine, Ben. Just getting in a bit late. What eshet rőből? H.E. gestured back toward his car, looking deeply uncomfortable. We received a call, Mom. A wellness chat from your son. The words hit me with the force of a second slap. It wasn't enough to strike me. It wasn't enough to throw me out of my own home. They had called the authorities, or the closest thing to them in this is to paint me as a confused old woman, lost unluck to out in the middle of the night. I could sheet had Hezboard with perfect clarity now. You had not seen the calculated cruelty before. This wasn't a son losing his temper. This was a strategy. They had a plan. On step 1 had been to provoke me. Step 2 was to discredit me, to make me seem unstable, perhaps even scandalous, so that when I fought back, no one would believe me. Have you ever underestimated someone's capacity for cruelty? The moment you realize the person you're dealing with is far more calculating than you ever imagined, és a chilling van. I looked at the new gleaming silver lock on my front door, caught in the stark security lights. It was no longer just a lock. It was a piece of evidence. My evidence. I gave Ben a calm, reassuring smile, the kind a perfectly sane woman would give. There's been a misunderstanding, a family disagreement, I said, my voice even unsteady. As you can see, I have my case. I am perfectly fine. I held up the new case for him to see, the metal winking in the light. My son and his wife are staying elsewhere tonight. I am sure they were just worried. The lie felt smooth, practiced. I was learning their game. Ben's shoulders visibly relaxed. I saw a composed woman in her own driveway, not a damsel in distress. Of course, Emeres Adabio, I am so sorry to have disturbed you. We have to follow up on every call. You understand? I understand completely, Ben. Thank you for being so diligent. I nodded, gave me one last look, and then retreated to his car. The headlights clicked off, plunging the driveway back into the soft glow of the porch light. As I drove away. The silence I left behind was heavier than before. I was alone, but I was no longer just a victim. I was a player in a game I hadn't known I was in. They didn't just want a house. They wanted to erase me. I finally turned and slid the new key into the lock. It turned with a beautiful, smooth precision. I stepped inside and closed the door, leaning my back against the solid wood. The silence of the house wrapped around me. It didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Mine. My purse vibrated on the entryway table. I pulled out my phone, expecting a text from my sister, perhaps, but it wasn't. It was a fraud alert from my bank displayed in stark red letters on the screen. Suspicious activity alert. A wire transfer of 8 million naira has been initiated from your joint savings account by Cosigner Alexander Adibio. Please reply yes to confirm or no to decline. My breast caught in my throat. 8 million. It was nearly everything Robert had left me. The money I lived on. They hadn't just tried to have me declared incompetent. They were trying to bleed me dry right now in the dead of night. This wasn't just a war for a house anymore. This was a war for my survival. I remembered the weight of his small hand in mine as we walked through the Loki Arts and Crafts Market. The air thick with the smell of carved wood and roasted corn. I was 8 years old and his eyes were wide with wonder. I bought him his first piggy bank that day, a little clay elephant, cheerfully painted with a slate Zoist beginner for a 50 Nero coin. He taught him Theo save Theo put a little aside from his allowance each week. This is for your future, my love, he told him, tapping the elephant's round belly. Every little bit adds up Theo something big. He never imagined a future voice saving for voice one without me. He never imagined és me ast he final big piggy bank Theo besmestopen. The text message from the bank guffed on my phone. And the only sound in the entire house voice the frantic panic dreaming of my own heart in my ears. 5 million naira. It was an obscene amount, a monstrous betrayal type told in sterile digital letters. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. For a shit-scanning moment, he felt paralyzed. This voice Alex, my son, my only child. My finger moved, a small jerky motion, and pressed the letters near the click of the keypad voice a tiny insignificant sound, but it felt like a declaration of war. It then pressed send. A confirmation message appeared almost instantly. Thank you. The transaction has been declined. Your account is temporarily frozen, pending a security review. Please visit your nearest branch. Earn. Safe. Illetve Bressy didn't realize he'd been holding. A ragged, shuddering gasp that voice have really found have shop. The immediate danger had passed. Hadn't succeeded. But the relief voice instantly soured by the truth of what had attempted. This wasn't a desperate grab for a few thousand to pay a bill. This was a calculated emptying of my life savings. This was an attempt to leave me with nothing. It was meant to break me completely. When someone shows you their true colors, do you believe them the first time? I think he was guilty of painting over the warning signs for years, the casual entitlement, the way let close pink for him, the slow erosion of all shared memories. I told myself it was just a phase, that I was building his own life. I hadn't wanted to think that the life I was building was on the wreckage of mine. The banks wouldn't open for another 8 hours. 8 hours for them to get desperate to try something else. The thought sent a fresh wave of ace through my veins. The joint account, a foolish sentiment set up years ago so I could help me with bills if he ever got sick, was now a weapon aimed at my heart. Tomorrow, first thing that would end, he would walk into that bank and he would surgically remove him from my financial life, cutting the cord so completely that I would never be able to touch a single Nero of my money again. He was no longer just defending my home. He was defending my right to exist, to be independent, to not be erased by my own céldesgerst. A new resolve hardened within me, turning my grief into something more useful, a shield. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone pinged again. It wasn't at the bank this time. The sound was different, the címei had assigned to one person in the world. A text message from Alex. My hand shook as she opened it, my mind racing through 100 possibilities. Would it be an apology, an excuse, a desperate plea? It was none of those things. The message on the screen was short, brutal, and aimed with surgical precision at the most vulnerable part of my soul. It read, "You owe me that money. That would be ashamed of what you have become." The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. The words on the screen didn't sting. They were a deception. Theo use his fresh memory, the memory of a man how had adored him, as a shield for his own despicable ghost. It was a new kind of law. A darkness he hadn't known my son possessed. The sharp metallic taste of fury was gone, replaced by the flat, stale taste of profound sorrow. My throat was suddenly dry. He walked into the kitchen, the one clue he wanted to get and turned into a sterile metal box and poured a glass of water. It tasted of nothing. He felt nothing but a hollow ringing ache. The house was silent, but in my mind, it voice filled with the sons of a memory had tried the so heard Theo keep buried. The faint rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. The sterile smell of antiseptics. The fell of my husband Robert's hand, papery and cool, lying in mine. It voiced her rainy season 5 years ago. A voice in a bed in your room, looking out at the garden he had planted, his breathing shallow. I knew I didn't have much time left. One evening when we were alone, I tightened his grip on my hand. Shop here, they whispered, his voice rough, weak sin. Promise me something. I told him he would promise him anything. The house, the money, it is all for Alex. You know that. But love can make a person blind, my dear. And you love that boy more than anything. I coughed. A painful rattling sound. Promise me. If he ever proves himself unworthy, if he ever puts a womanish grist before his moteres heart, you will protect what we built. Not for you, for the memory of OS. I had cried then, telling him not to speak of such things, that Alex would never be that man. But Robert had been insistent, his eyes clear and firm, even as his body failed him. Promise me, shop here, and had. It was a long hidden secret, a promise he made with a broken heart, praying Theo God he would never, ever have Theo keep it. Now his szörnyes text message echoed in his silence, a cruel perversion of his father's name. That would be ashamed of what you have become. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Oh, my love, I thought, looking up at the ceiling as if Robert could hear me. You were right. You sought a weakness in him. I refused Theoshi. My grief, which had been a paralyzing fog, now crystallized into a single hard point of purpose. I voice no longer was a mother defending her home. I voice a widow fulfilling her husband's last wish. I walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs, my hand gripping the smooth, warm wood of the banister Robert had curved. Each step was firm, deliberate. The oak box was on the top shelf of my wardrobe, just where it had always been. I lifted it down, the familiar weight of it, a comfort. It held our entire life together. I placed it on my bed and lifted the lid. The scent of old paper and history rose up to meet me. The house deed was on top along with our marriage certificate and Alex's birth records, but my fingers searched beneath them for a 6-sealed manila envelope I had not touched since the day my lawyer had given it to me after Robert's will voice read. I pulled it out. On the front, in my husband's familiar, steady handwriting, were words that made a shiver run down my spine. For shop here, Theo be opened only if your son forgets how is your son. My hands, which had been shaking just minutes before, were now perfectly still. I slid my finger under the seal and broke it open. Inside was not a long, rambling letter, but a single folded sheet of official-looking paper and a smaller personal note clipped to it. I unfolded the note first. His handwriting was as clear as the day I wrote it. My eyes scanned the words, my heart pounding against my ribs. It began with one devastating line. My dearest shop here, if you are reading this, then I am sorry your boyish heart was not as strong as his moteres. His words were a cost, a whisper of love from a word away, and they studied me more than any living voice could. My eyes scanned the rest of the short handwritten note. I pray you never have to read this, but I could not leave you unprotected. I thought the way I looked at Chloe, the way a man looks at a beautiful object I wishes to possess, and I thought the way she looked at our home with the same covetous eyes. Love is one thing, shop here. Ownership is another. The document attached is not a weapon. It is a shield. It is the last act of a husband trying to protect a woman he adores. Use it, and do not fail a momentous guilt. You will be honoring my memory, not betraying it. Your loving husband, Robert. My tears finally came then. Not hot tears of rays, but silent, sorrowful tears for the brilliant, loving man we have had seen the storm coming long before he had. He had built me a life boat while he was still admiring the view from a ship he didn't know was sinking. With trembling fingers, he unfolded the official document. The sight of it made me gasp. It wasn't a copy of his will or an amendment to the deed. The letter had voice from our family lawyer, Belogan Unsigns, and the title at the top was clear, printed in stark, bold letters. The Adabio family revocable trust. He had signed it years ago, thinking it was a standard bit of estate planning, a way to avoid probate court. He had not read the fine print. Robert had handled it all. My eyes scanned the dense legal text, my finger tracing the lines, until he found the section I must have known he would one day need. It was titled Article 4, the Trace Prerogative and Morality Clause. My breast hitched. Robert hadn't simply left the house and his assets to Alex upon his death. I had placed everything in a trust with me, shop here adibio, as the sole and uncontestable trustee for my lifetime. Alex was the beneficiary, yes, but I had no power. And then he saw the clause itself, the shield I had forced for me. It stated that if the beneficiary, Alexander Adabio, was found to have committed an act of gross familial misconduct, which was defined as physical violence against a trustee, attempted theft of trust assets, or actions taken to unlawfully seize control of the primary residence, the trustee had the sole authority to permanently and irrevocably remove him as a beneficiary. All assets, including the house, would revert to my name alone, free and clear of any future claim. It was all there. The slap, the attempted 8 million euro wire transfer, the call to security to have me declared incompetent. I hadn't exhausted met the conditions. I had shattered them. Do you believe a parent can cheat the true nature of their child, even when it is painful? My Robert had, and his foresight was my salvation. A profound, waking love for my husband filled the hollow spaces in my chest. The sun would rise in a few hours. He knew Sunday the banks and law offices would be closed, a day of enforced quiet. But Monday morning, as soon as the doors of Belogan Unsigns opened at 8 óra, he would be on his doorstep. He would execute this clause. He would honor my husband's last wish. He would take everything back for the first time since he shut down for that disastrous dinner. A sense of absolute control washed over me. He carefully folded the letter and the trust document, placing them back into the oak box and closing the lid. This was my proof. This was my power. The house was utterly silent, a peaceful sanctuary. It was mine. A sudden, violent noise from downstairs shattered the peace. Bam! 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 A furious rhythmic pounding on the front door echoed up the staircase. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the sound of rage. Then came the voice, distorted and ugly, roaring through the sickle of the door. Mulder, open this door right now. I know you're in there. My curt voice declined. What did you do? The first thing he heard clearly through the sickle was not my name, but a single guttural word. My. It was my soonish voice, but stripped of all warmth, all familiarity. It was the raw, ugly sound of frustrated girst. What did you do to the account? My curt voice declined at the hotel. Open this door. The pounding continued, a brutish, rhythmic assault on the home I voice raised in. Each boom of his fist against the wood voice an exclamation point to his words. There was no concern, no question of my well-being. He had been struck. He had left my home in the middle of the night, and the only thing I cared about was his access to my money. Listening to the boy had raised scream obscenities at my front door was a unique kind of hell. He stood at the top of the stairs, My hand resting on the smooth, cool wood of the banister, and simply listened. The sons painted a vivid, horrifying picture. I could hear the violent, feudal rattling of the new deadboltas hátrait Theo forced to handle. I could hear the crunch of their shoes on the gravel driveway as they paced in fury. Andy could hear her voice, crash, a shrill and piercing counterpoint to his low roar. She can't do this to you, Alex. It is your inheritance. Tell her don't let her get away with this. She voiced her poison, the constant whisper in his ear, but he voiced one way how had willingly drunk it. How do you reason with someone way how now only speaks the language of money when a lifetime of love and shared history means less than a bank balance? It did not move. It did not make a sound. I voice a statue in my own home, a silent observer of my son's final transformation into a monster. The house, my fortress, held firm. The new locks did their job. The walls my husband and the had built did not tremble. There was a final frustrated roar from Alex, followed by the sharp crack of something hitting the door. Perhaps he kicked it. Then silence. I held my breath, straining my ears. I heard two car doors slam, the sound sharp and angry in the night. An engine revved, tires squalled on the asphalt, and then the sound faded, leaving nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. A voice gone. The immediate sees voice over. A deep shuddering sigh escaped my lips, and descended down onto the top step, the cramps leaving my legs. The silence they left behind voice vast and ringing. The house was safe, but the invisible scars of their rage were now etched onto my front door. I waited a few more minutes before slowly descending the stairs. I crept out the living room window, the one that looked out onto the driveway, and carefully peeked through the blinds. The driveway was empty. The street was quiet. They were truly gone. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, so profound it was a physical weight. I turned from the window, my eyes falling on my phone, which I had left on the coffee table. The screen was lit up. A new message had arrived. The number was not saved in my contacts, but I knew with a sinking certainty way how it was from. My hand was steady as she picked it up and read the text. It was from Chloe. Enjoy your big empty house this weekend, shop here. Come Monday, our lawyer is filing an emergency petition to have you declared mentally unfit. VLL have you out and Alex will have full control of his inheritance, just like HR supposed to. It is what Robert would have wanted. Saturday nights, Robert and I used to have a ritual. After dinner, we sit in the living room, the windows open to the warm Legos air, and they have a small glass of palm wine while had a cup of royos tea. We listen to the quiet hum of the neighborhood, the distant sound of a generator, the chirping of crickets. It was a calm, predictable peace, the kind you build over a lifetime. Tonight, on this Saturday, the 9th of October, the silence in my house was not peaceful. It was a suffocating vacuum, and the words on Chloe's text message pulsed in the darkness like a venomous creature, mentally unfit. The phrase was a cold hand closing around my throat. It was the ultimate weapon against a woman my age, designed to strip away not just my assets, but my credibility, my voice, my very identity. They wanted to turn me into a cost in my only fee. A word of the state to be menaced by the same way how had assaulted me. My mouth was suddenly disorderly. The phone felt slick and cold in my hand. I placed it face down on the coffee table as if Theo muttered her words. I would not fall apart. I would not panic. Falling apart was what they wanted, what they expected. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to be stronger than you ever thought possible? When crumbling simply wasn't an option. I walked to the kitchen and filled the kettle. My movements deliberate, almost robotic. Is punt fragrant a lives into my favorite ceramic mug, the one with a small hairline crack that Robert had always had gave it character. The ritual voice a small anchor in a rising sea. While the water boiled, he looked at the clock. 9:45 PM hot the rest of the night, all of Sunday. Less than 36 hours until the VRS Odys opened on Monday morning. They had started a race, on the wood bed them the filet them bin. He carried the steaming mug, each warms, a small comfort, Theo my chilled hands, back Theo the living room. He sat not in my usual chair, but in Robert's chair. It felt right. He took out a pen and a notepad from the desk drawer. My mind, which had been reeling moments before, voice now wisely clear. He wrote a list. 1. Emer Belogan, call 7:30 on Monday-be his first appointment. 2. Oak box. Organize all documents. That raised is the priority. 3. Bank statements. Print everything. 4. Write it all down. The slap, the security call, the wire transfer, the threats, dates, times, everything. My pen scratched across the paper. The sound. A small rebellion against the silence. As he wrote, my eyes drifted Theo a silver-framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Alex, ő 8, beaming, holding up a small fish HD-coat on a family trip Theo Tarka Bay. His eyes were so bright, so full of innocent joy. A wave of grief, so powerful it almost stole my breath, washed over me. Was there any part of that little boy left inside him and trying to destroy me? The thought didn't soften me, it hardened me. That boy deserved to be protected from the monster he had become. He finished my tale and stood up. My purpose renewed. He would organize the box tonight. He would be ready. He retrieved the oak box from my bedroom and set it on Taylor's dining room table, the site of the first battle. He opened it and began to sort the papers under the bright overhead light, crediting neat piles, financial, legal, personal. The traced document and Robert's letter replaced Theo one side, my shield and my sword. As he reached the bottom of the box, my fingers brushed against something small, plastic, and unfamiliar. He pulled it out. It was a small silver digital voice recorder, no bigger than my thumb. He vaguely remembered Robert buying it for me years ago, thinking he could use it to record shopping lists. He thought it was silly and had tossed it into the box, forgotten until now. It felt cool and smooth in my palm. Out of idle curiosity, of whim, he pressed a small button with a triangle symbol. He expected to hear nothing, or perhaps my own voice from years ago. Instead, a voice filled the silent room, sharp, clear, and utterly horrifying. It was Chloe. It doesn't matter if she says no, her recorded voice came, laced with an oily conspiratorial tone. The lawyer said if we filed her petition first on Monday and claim she is confused and paranoid, any move she makes will just look like proof. Once she is declared incompetent, the truth won't matter. Alex will be her legal guardian. HLL control everything. The betrayal voice is so brazen, so confident that it was almost a work of art. They walked into Emer Beloganes Odys on Monday morning, their faces a perfect mask of worried concern. Chloe even had a hand resting on Alex's arm, a portrait of the supportive wife standing by her husband in the face of his mother's tragic decline. My son looked at me, his eyes full of a carefully rehearsed pity. Mulder, I said, his voice soft. I am glad you're here. We were so worried. We were already spoken to your lawyer. We're just trying to help you. They had no idea they hadn't walked into a negotiation. They had walked into an execution. Emer Belogan, a man whose wisdom voice-as oldast hemölhojgani desk hásat behind, simply nodded. Please it. Let her silence hung in her for a long moment before he slid a document across her desk. This, he said, his voice come unsteady. Is he Adobe of family revocable trust? I am sure you're familiar with it. I watched her color drain from Chloe's face. Alex just looked confused. A trust, he stammered. Dash will left everything to me. No, Alex, Emmer Belogan corrected gently. Your father will left everything to this trust, a trust of which your mother is the sole uncontestable trust. Chloe let out a sharp, ugly laugh. That's ridiculous. Your lawyer will tear that apart. Shop here is not mentally competent to be a trustee. She is confused, paranoid. She was reciting the lines from her recorded script. It was almost poetic. Emmer Belologgan let her finish, his expression unchanging. When she was done, he reached into his briefcase and placed a small silver voice recorder on the center of his desk. The sight of it made Alex flinch. Chloe Zoe stared, her mouth slightly open. Andas for the matter of your mother's competence, Emmer Balogan said, his eyes looking into Chloe's. I believe this recording made within Emmer's Adobe's home a few weeks ago clarifies your own intentions quite perfectly. He pressed the play button. Chloe's voice, clear and sharp in the quiet, prestigious Odys, filled the air. Once she is declared incompetent, the trust won't matter. Alex will be her legal guardian. He'll control everything. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the most profound silence I have ever heard. I watched my son's face crumble, the arrogance and deceit melting away Theo revealed her terrified weak little boy underneath. Chloe's voice shit white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. They were broken. Emmer Belogan turned the recorder off. Asper article refer of the trust, he announced his voice now carrying the finality of a jutgásgeddel. I have been instructed by the trustee Emmer Shophia Adabio, Theo inform you that for reasons of physical assault, attempted theft of assets, and conspiracy to defraud, you, Alexander Adabio, are hereby permanently and irrevocably removed as a beneficiary. You have no claim to the house, the accounts, or any asset held within the trust. You have nothing. An hour later, I was home. The afternoon sun was warm on the front steps and the scent of my rosemary bush filled the air. My home was quiet again. It was truly mine and then I heard them. I looked through the living room window and there it was, the final pathetic scene of their tragedy. My son, my Alex, was on his knees on the pavement, his hands clasped together, his face a mess of tears and desperation, begging. Chloe stood beside him, her makeup running in dark streams down her face, her hands pressed against the gate, crying for Matteo let her in, her voice a thin, pitiful wail in the afternoon quiet. The titlás promise, a story of pain and betrayal, was now my reality. He had slept me at the dining table, telling me not to argue with his wife in her house, the house he built. And now he was on the street, and she was crying at the gate, and neither of them would ever step foot in it again. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't even feel triumph. I just felt a deep, quiet, and final peace. A house is not a possession to be won. It is a sanctuary built with love and sacrifice, and it has a memory of each one. When that love is desecrated, it will defend itself. My husband had taught me that, and my son had forced me to learn it. I turned away from the window, leaving them to their performance on the street. I had a life to reclaim. A parent's love should be a sanctuary, not a resource to be drained. And when that sanctuary is attacked, you have to build walls of self-respect, not to keep others out, but to protect the peace within. What do you think is the most important lesson you learn from this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.